upstate New York home, a group of 13-year-old boys is carrying out a reign of terror on screen that would put them on the nation's most wanted list in real life.
This is the nation's top-selling video game.
There are plenty of violent video games on the market today, but what sets Grand Theft Auto 3 apart is the game's stunning realism.
The year is 2001, and the next generation of consoles were flying off of store shelves. Sony's PlayStation and Nintendo's N64 firmly entrenched themselves into the annals of gaming history. However, it was inevitable that they would eventually make way for Sony's PlayStation 2, the Nintendo GameCube, and the newcomer entering the console arena, Microsoft's Xbox. As powerful as their predecessors were, this new generation aimed to revolutionize an industry that had already reached new levels of popularity. Nintendo coasted along with its staples such as Mario and Zelda, to name just two. Microsoft exploded onto the scene, primarily based off of titles like Halo, as well as Xbox Live, which was far and wide ahead of its competitors in the online multiplayer arena. And meanwhile, the PlayStation 2 remained as strong as ever, having wrestled away the Final Fantasy series away from Nintendo, as well as holding its own respectable library of what are now considered to be timeless classics, which for some, the most impressive today being Grand Theft Auto 3 by Rockstar Games, released on October 23rd, 2001 exclusively to the PlayStation 2, and then later ported to the Xbox and PC. Although it obviously wasn't the first in the series, little did players know at the time they were about to witness a game that skyrocketed a franchise into one of the most recognizable of all time, garnering billions of dollars worldwide and leaving in its wake a legacy steeped not only in adoration, but also controversy. Join me today as we learn just why Grand Theft Auto 3 was great. By 2001, the series has 3 titles to its name, with each loosely focusing around a protagonist's criminal adventures in real-life inspired fictitious cities. You weren't a tunic-clad hero saving the world from evil bandits or collecting magic rocks to defeat an ultimate evil. No, it took a far less wholesome approach. You were stealing cars, robbing banks, fucking prostitutes, and murdering people. The player commonly starts as a nobody, but through outrageous criminal acts and favors, they slowly climb up in rank in various popular crime syndicates, popularized by news media and Hollywood. Its tone immediately set it apart from its contemporaries, providing an intriguing contrast, as well as exposing it to a world of controversy.
But of all the worrisome materials swirling about out there, Grand Theft Auto 3 may have given our generation of adults something new to worry about. Since it was released 9 months ago, Grand Theft...
But as it usually tends to go, its beginnings are far more humble, and to truly understand its impact in the burgeoning years of social media, we must first cover its beginnings, including its 2 predecessors, and the games that inspired them. This takes us back about 40 years in 1984, and thousands of miles away from its eventual western home in New York City, to the land of Scotland. It's here where a small group of very important people resided, with the series' very beginnings being traced back to the Kingsway Amateur Computer Club, a group of nerds and computer science and art students who made a number of games for Spectrum computers as a hobby when they weren't busy studying. At this point, done purely for fun and learning, The team created a variety of games for the system over the years, until eventually they moved on and experimented with Commodore's brand new Amiga personal computer, which was a 32-bit machine that allowed for far superior graphics and sound. One of the more popular emerging genres of the time were space shooters. From Space Invaders to Galaga, it was quite a simple yet fun genre to play, and also to create. They would design a game called Menace, where the player piloted a ship on the planet Draconia, breaking down its defenses and destroying the alien creatures who lived there. It was a humble game, but also quality, and it was in a genre that was growing in popularity. These things combined were enough to catch the attention of a publisher called Psygnosis, which was a huge development for the team, who promptly renamed themselves to DMA Design. They bought a small and very cramped studio, recruited more members, and they continued to pump out games, with most of them being various side-scrolling shooters, as they tried to capitalize on the success of Menace. However, their next big hit was something entirely different called Lemmings, which was a puzzle game where players were tasked with navigating small humanoid creatures through dungeons and labyrinths from the beginning to the end without getting them killed. It was an innocent little game, and it became quite popular on its release, vastly overtaking Menace. They would commit quite heavily to their new hit, producing many sequels over the following years to equal levels of success, until another important but devastating event transpired. Psygnosis was acquired by Sony, along with the Lemmings IP, which left them without both a publisher and a franchise that, at that point, they had invested so much into. But they persevered, and they would eventually see more opportunities. Most notably, primarily due to their success with Lemmings, they were approached by Nintendo to make a game for their upcoming console, the Nintendo Ultra 64. However, what they came up with wasn't quite what they were expecting. Titled Body Harvest, the name alone was enough to raise red flags in Nintendo's more safe and wholesome approach to gaming. It was quite a mature game, set in a sci-fi world where the players would gun down alien creatures and humanoids. It even had blood in it, which at the time was rather risque in gaming, as it was often hidden behind secret codes to unlock. Needless to say, it didn't really sit too well with Nintendo, who at the time preferred more sanitized forms of gaming. Believe it or not, at the time this was considered to be quite violent, at least to Nintendo, who unfortunately promptly backed out of their publisher role, which was another blow to the team, but luckily they were picked up by Midway. And so the game was finished, released, and it's a respectable success, but far more important was that with its third-person perspective and mature theme, it set an important precedent for another game that would forever change the industry. The next chapter begins with the Hauser brothers, Sam and Dan, who in the 90s entered the video game industry in BMG's new video game branch in London. And interestingly enough, they weren't really interested in video games, as it seemed like most of the popular titles at the time were very sanitized and aimed for kids. What they were fans of, however, were Hollywood action movies of high-speed chases and intense gunfights. Violence, sex, and shock. Something that was found within the video game industry, but very rarely and often heavily censored. Now, in the need of a new and reliable publisher, and feeling the potential of the tone of Body Harvest, one of the founders of DMA, Dave Jones, would visit the Hauser brothers' office in 1995, and he pitched something to both of their taste. It was essentially the video game form of Cops and Robbers, a multiplayer game where players would control police and criminals and chasing each other around a large city. It would have everything that you could find from a Hollywood movie, such as guns, fast cars, police chases, and a lot of action. The brothers were intrigued, and the project was greenlit, being given the working name Race and Chase. As described, there were two sides, cops and criminals. They would be placed in this giant, custom-designed metropolitan city. Player 1 would control the cop, whose goal was to chase and ultimately capture and arrest the fleeing criminal who was controlled by Player 2. But early on, they would run into an issue. The team found that it was far more fun to be a criminal, as the cop had to obey the law and dodge pedestrians, whereas the criminal, of course, had free reign to do whatever they pleased. And in fact, it was actually quite fun to cause as much destruction and death as possible. They would tweak the game many times over the coming months, trying to come up with a resolution, until something clicked. If following the law was so unfun, and breaking it was far more enjoyable, why even have two sides? What if running over pedestrians gave points instead of taking them away? What if the player was given free reign to terrorize the city, and the unfun part, the police, was instead controlled by the computer? It was at this point that the game had started to adopt characteristics that the series is now known for. You could steal cars, start fires, gun down pedestrians, all in this massive open world city, with the major difference to now being its camera angle being this aerial perspective. At this point, through the Hauser brothers, DMA was able to secure BMG as a publisher and renaming the project Grand Theft Auto. It was at this point where, in more ways than one, the rubber met the road. They began adding features to form the core of the game. They implemented entire cities called Liberty City, based off of New York City, San Andreas, which was based off of San Francisco, and finally Vice City, which was based off of Miami, serving as the blueprint for what some consider to be the greatest gaming trilogy of all time. These cities were all initially drawn by hand, and then slowly implemented into the game. Missions were added, so there was some sort of structure instead of just wanton free-roaming chaos.
Now it's time for you to find out why they call me the donkey, huh?
Although at this point, the focus was much more on the gameplay, as the missions were quite banal and they rarely had any sort of continuity to them. And the game overall had a very fast, arcade style of gameplay to define it. As for the series' signature wanted level system, interestingly, it all came from a bug. The intention was for the police to simply pull over the player and arrest them if they caught up to them, but a glitch caused them to recklessly slam into them with their vehicles with no regard for their own safety. While it was unintentional, the developers found this to be extremely fun, and so they changed this dynamic to different levels of wanted, with the police becoming more and more aggressive and relentless the higher level you were. At higher levels, they would set up roadblocks, equip body armor, more powerful weapons. The level would raise as crimes were committed, and it could be cleared by either visiting paint shops or finding rare bribe tokens hidden throughout the world, birthing a system that would become standard not only to the series, but also its many clones for decades to come.
Now, all the people in here are working on what DMA hopes will be its new blockbuster. It's a game called Grand Theft Auto. It's all about a car chase through the streets of a fictional, probably American city. Here are some of the maps they've been working on.
Development continued, more missions were added, the gameplay was refined, and it all came together in November of 1997, where the game was released exclusively for Windows and DOS, as the game actually sold above its expectations, reaching over 1 million just 1 year later in November of 1998.
The controversy thing really got out of hand quite quickly, and it took everyone by surprise. You steal cars, you run over policemen, and you shoot people in the head. What? And it really struck a chord. And so we ended up with questions being asked in Parliament, because the prevailing wisdom at that point was games were for children.
Knowing full well just how much the game stood out due to its violence, it was marketed to be controversial. They even went as far as hiring an ex-publisher named Max Clifford to leak to news corporations of the game's extreme level of violence, hoping that it would start a cascade of fear-mongering and stirring up parents to protest to protect their children's innocence. It was extremely effective. As predicted, news outlets ran stories of it and linked acts of real-world violence to the game, making it something of a taboo, which only made people want it more. It almost worked a little too well, in fact, as BMG even threatened to pull the project due to the intense backlash and headaches surrounding it.
Oh, it was rough.
We were kind of the bastard child of DMA. You know, no one really wanted to work on GTA.
It certainly wasn't one of the games that DMA Design were looking at that was going to be a big hit for them.
But the team were able to convince them to commit, which of course ended up being the right call. Although it wasn't perfect by any means, it did see enough success to prompt a sequel. The second made various changes, but unfortunately it didn't quite live up to its predecessor, receiving quite mediocre reviews upon its release, with many reviewers citing a lack of innovation to set it apart from the series' debut. The same top-down camera angle in particular remained to be a sticking point, and so the series' future was thrown into question. It had started to become clear to Rockstar that they hadn't quite fully tapped into this massive potential that the series had. The series wasn't canned quite yet, but there's no more room for error. They would get one last shot to fully capture this potential with the series' third game, Grand Theft Auto 3.
The technical wizardry has attracted loyal fans, but the graphic violence has attracted angry critics. Denounced by Congress here in the U.S., the game has been outlawed in Australia, and several other countries are also considering bans.
The transition from 2D to 3D is a subject that we've discussed before in this series, and for good reason. It was one of the most critical moments in gaming history. As technology improved, more and more memory was becoming available, and processors were becoming faster with each passing year, pushing developers to flirt with the idea of entering this third dimension. It's hard to do justice this feeling of anticipation and excitement of watching your favorite series make the leap, of seeing Mario or Link in full 3D glory, and opening up this whole new world, not just graphically, but also mechanically with three-dimensional platforming and puzzle solving. It was a crucial moment, to say the least, with some franchises absolutely nailing it, and others fading into obscurity. Although Grand Theft Auto would miss this initial wave in the PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, and Sega Saturn era, they would finally make the plunge with its third installment. It was clear that they had the core philosophy figured out. It was just the engine and the graphics holding it back. And so shortly after GTA 2's lukewarm release, work began on a project that they would hope redeemed the series. Initially, the team aimed for Sega's new Dreamcast console as the game's final destination, but unfortunately, while impressive in many different ways, it simply lacked the processing power to fuel their high ambitions.
Sega Dreamcast, it's thinking.
And so this idea would eventually be scrapped, and they instead set their eyes on Sony's upcoming, much more powerful PlayStation 2. And so, 3D modeling began, adding very basic geometry, covering the terrain, streets, buildings, and owing to its roots in the first installment, GTA 3 would be a 3D revisioning of its first stage, Liberty City, except now they had this whole new dimension to work with. However, 3D doesn't mean the third-person perspective that this series is now known for. At this point in time, interestingly enough, the camera angle was still intended to be exclusively the same top-down view that the first two had standardized. However, now, with an actual 3D environment, some members of the team thought it to be a disservice as it failed to take full advantage of it. This would split them almost down the middle, eventually forcing a vote, with the third-person perspective just narrowly winning, forever altering the course of the series in a remarkable way. The visual design also underwent major changes through its development. At first, it would retain its brightly colored and almost cartoon-like aesthetic of the first game, but it would be scrapped during the alpha development of the game, as now with a more realistic environment. The team thought it more appropriate to go with a more realistic feel, toning down the brightness and dulling the colors, and recreating as closely as possible the real New York City. There were different districts such as Chinatown, the dirty slums, the red light district, the brightly lit downtown, or a quiet, rich suburban neighborhood, creating this distinction not only geographically, but also socially and economically. Certain gangs would have control over specific areas, making them either safer to traverse if you were allied with them, or more dangerous if they were your rivals. This transition from 2D to 3D allowed them to actually craft something that was recognizable and identifiable, taking it to this whole new level. And as innovative as this already was, the team was on the verge of something even more, as they flirted with the idea of destructible buildings. The idea was to make certain buildings destructible with bombs, either through missions or just through the player's own free will, in order to give them the ability to make this personalized impact on the city. This ended up being largely cut because of time constraints, but there were still light elements of it, such as the Blowfish mission where you destroy the Triad Fish Factory, which was a nice touch, but still just a whisper compared to their ambitions for this fully destructible Liberty City. But still, it didn't stop players from being blown away with its realism. The city was populated with vehicles of all kinds, from sports cars to SUVs, vans, semis. The game would hold a total of 61 to choose from. Pedestrians would be added both on and off the road, commuting to and from work. Electronic billboards displayed ads for products. Certain areas were matched thematically with the gangs who resided there, and the city certainly had a lot of character added to it, retaining a lot of its wacky, exaggerated themes that it had become known for. Weather effects were added. The world was on a day and night cycle, which was still a new emerging feature at the time. This would affect the world not just aesthetically, but also functionally, as certain mission contacts were only available at certain times of the day or night. Radio stations had actual DJs.
Hello, next caller. You are on Chatterbox.
Yeah, you were talking about short guys and attitudes. Well, you know, you'd have an attitude too if you couldn't reach the friggin' cheesy squirrels at the grocery store.
Pedestrians would react to your actions in appropriate ways.
Yep, I've been drinking again.
I'm so happy I could shit.
The level of detail at the time was certainly one of the most impressive things of the game, as they took full advantage of this new dimension, giving it a lot of depth and personality in this exaggerated portrayal of late 90s, early 2000s American culture. Another innovation was its refined story-driven campaign, which was now a focal point of the entire game.
Don't mess this up. Maybe there'll be more work for you. Now get out of here.
There were missions and story in the 2D era, but they were quite generic and erratic in the sense that oftentimes it didn't really have much to do with each other. The focus of the game was almost entirely on its gameplay, with missions to support it. However, now with the appropriate tools to create this believable 3D world, the story had started to become a primary focus. Characters now had personality, and they drove the plot. Alliances would be formed, others would be broken, as the player was taken across this New York-inspired metropolis, performing various felonious acts along the way.
I see nothing but good things for you, my boy.
Motion capture would perform the heavy lifting in its animated cutscenes that had full voice acting from professional actors to support it.
I got a little job for you, pal. The Farrelly brothers have owed me money for too long and they need to be taught some respect.
I'm asking you to destroy that spank factory as a personal favor to me, Salvatore Leone.
Let's teach these would-be tough guys what it means to be a tough guy.
It truly marked a new frontier in storytelling, especially considering that it wasn't even in the RPG genre. It was almost akin to this interactable Hollywood movie, which is due in part to its heavy inspiration from the 1983 hit Scarface, which details the journey of the Cuban immigrant Tony Montana going through the criminal underworld and performing jobs and rising to the top of a crime family, even down to the soundtrack, which was played in the game's various radio stations. In the place of Tony Montana is the playable character Claude Speed, who is a silent protagonist. This was done for roleplay reasons and to further immerse the player into the world, as the silent protagonist's lack of voice makes room for theirs. It is similar to the Legend of Zelda series, where the hero Link's only vocal noises are various grunts. It's done because Nintendo wants you, the player, to be Link. They want you to feel like this hero saving the princess and protecting the world from evil bandits, even going as far as to letting the player name him in its many iterations. The only difference here, though, is that instead of saving the princess, you're fucking her mother in the backseat of your car behind the Burger King. Claude is a silent, cold, calculating, ruthless killer, and an excellent henchman, as he never questions any of his objectives or the motives behind them. He carries out any and all requests, no matter how fantastical or dangerous they may be. and is something of this Terminator-like character within the world. His rampage on the inhabitants of Liberty City, whether they be criminals or otherwise, would be the most violent and extreme that the gaming industry had seen at this point. As you would imagine, since we were now in a much more realistic environment, any controversy regarding its first two installments were about to be made insignificant for what was to come. The development continued, and in June of 2001, they demoed the game at that year's E3 convention in Los Angeles, expecting to wow crowds by showing all of these groundbreaking designs. However, disappointingly, perhaps due to the second's lukewarm response, audiences were quite indifferent to what they came up with, which was an unsettling sign because, for what they all knew at the time, this could have been the final Grand Theft Auto. Dan Houser would echo the concerns among the team, saying the following: "The early part of showing people the game, including E3 2001, was disconcerting because it was incredibly underwhelming, because we thought it could be magical. It's an experience that's really unlike anything you've seen before, and people were scratching their heads around it. We were all, are we wrong?" What's more, things were complicated even further just 1 month out from release, as tragedy strikes the United States in the form of a terror attack on New York City's World Trade Center. Outside of the game, the team is forced to vacate their headquarters for over a month. And within the game, we had what was essentially a fictitious New York City, where the player drives through the streets over pedestrians and gunning down everything and everyone in their path. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the project had to be halted until some major changes were made. The skyline of Liberty City had to be altered to avoid references to the Twin Towers. Collisions to buildings with unmannable planes had to be disabled entirely, and the color of police vehicles had to change so that they resembled actual New York City cruisers less. It did also spawn some false rumors, such as the now debunked thought that the game's only plane, the Dodo, had its wings cut and its flying capability reduced in response to the attacks. Fans speculated that at one point it was fully flyable, even having specific missions related to flying, but this ended up being disproven as some design documents were released pre-9/11 that confirmed that this was their original intent. Still though, the team waited anxiously to see just how one of the most unfortunately timed free-roaming city action-adventure games would be received. There's already some clear nervousness of pushing things too far, as evidenced with the fact that during that year's E3 conference, those in charge of the presentation were explicitly told to not play up the violence within the game and to always explain that the objectives aim it towards rival gangs and never at innocent pedestrians and police forces. And in fact, in various ways, the game punishes you for doing that, such as further increasing your wanted level and increasing your chance at either being arrested or killed.
Grand Theft Auto 3 is the nation's top-selling video game this year, and a particularly big hit with teenage boys.
It's just something fun to do. It takes your mind off of things. Like an adrenaline rush.
Children are not just watching violence on screen, they're acting it out in increasingly realistic settings.
But these nerves would soon be put to their true test, as after 27 months, officially starting in August of 1999 to October of 2021, the game saw its release to the PlayStation 2, and then to the Xbox and PC several months later. The controversy surrounding the game, as predicted, was astronomical. News outlets ran story after story decrying not only just its violence, but the fact that the setting in which it took place in was so realistic. warning parents that this new best-selling video game would turn their children into violent monsters, even making direct comparisons to violent, real-world events.
Critics worry that these increasingly ferocious games are desensitizing children to violence. Much was made of the fact that the boys who opened fire on their classmates in Columbine were obsessed with a fatalistic game called Doom.
Things got out of hand very quickly, as some outlets took to straight up spreading misinformation of how the game functioned.
You see that you get extra points for shooting somebody in the head as opposed to shooting them in the body. You have to wonder exactly what the values that we're teaching our children.
Disingenuity aside, the fact was that Grand Theft Auto was at the center of this discussion of the dynamic of video game violence, joining forces with more realistic environments, putting it in a world of controversy as concerned parents began to protest it. But what players found was what Rockstar promised. A game that was so cinematic and story-driven, it felt like an interactive movie. Owing to this, it opens up with a 3-minute-long cutscene with the protagonist, Claude, making his escape from a bank robbery.
Sorry, babe. I'm an ambitious girl. Small time.
The story is one of immediate betrayal, as in the process of escaping, his girlfriend Catalina turns against him, shooting him dead on the spot. Or so she thought. Claude ends up surviving his wounds, but is of course arrested and unanimously found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, while being transported, by pure luck it seems, the Colombian cartel ambushes the police convoy, freeing an important prisoner for them, which allows Claude and his friend 8-Ball to conveniently escape. It's here where the game officially begins, where to get back on your feet, you begin taking jobs for various criminal groups, with the ultimate goal for now being revenge on the woman who left you for dead. The first, most immediately noticeable change is stated as the new third-person perspective, which would become standard for all future iterations of the franchise, although there still was the ability to switch to the top-down aerial view for those feeling nostalgic. And interestingly, although it was scrapped, at one point the game did have a first-person perspective. This would have been usable both on foot and in vehicles, providing an interesting perspective of the game world, but for unknown reasons it would be scrapped, and players would have to wait many years later until GTA 5 would add this perspective as an option. As you would expect, this new perspective was a huge change, as you now had to aim at targets to kill them, which was done either with a toggled lock-on option in third person, or manually in an optional stationary first-person perspective. And as open world as the game was, it starts off quite restricted, largely done to even out the learning curve, as the full city was quite massive for the time. You begin in Portland, which is the first of 3 areas in the game. During the escape, the cartel bombed the bridge leading to the second area, Staten Island, which will remain inaccessible until it's repaired after the player has reached a certain point in the story. Each of these 3 districts have a very distinct aesthetic and design. Portland is more of an industrial area and the lowest income of the 3. It's polluted, rundown, smoggy from its various factories, and containing plenty of rundown buildings, as well as rundown people, holding the cheapest and slowest cars in the game. Staten Island is a step up. It's a much busier and more claustrophobic downtown area that's packed with skyscrapers and designed around Manhattan Island. The area is a bit more cleanly and holding more luxurious vehicles with long stretches of road. And lastly is the Shoreside Vale, which holds the wealthiest of Liberty City. This area is rife with large houses, parks, winding turns, fast sports cars, and is the most open of the 3. Each of these areas have their own unique factions warring against each other for control, and once you got to the point where you unlocked all 3 of them, it was quite easy to become lost due to the sheer size of the city. You're given a quick tutorial of the controls, and for the first mission, you're directed to your safe house, which is a critical hub for the players to save, to stock up on guns if they found enough secrets, and new to the series, store their vehicles in the garage for later use. There are 3 safe houses total, 1 for each district in the game. Through 8-Ball, you're introduced to a strip club manager named Luigi, who has ties to the Mafia, which becomes Claude's first major organization that he works with.
Don't mess this up. Maybe there'll be more work for you.
They're currently warring with the Triad Gang, which Claude is tasked to eliminate by either hunting down named targets, infiltrating their headquarters, and finally blowing it up with a dump truck rigged with a bomb in the previously mentioned Blowfish mission. These early missions slowly ease the player into the game, particularly familiarizing them with the driving controls and the general navigation of the city. Owing to its title, driving makes up a large portion of the gameplay, so it was crucial that it felt smooth, fun, and responsive. It was quite the vast improvement from its predecessors, particularly because of the new camera angle, which actually allowed the player to see what was ahead of them and give them time to react. And this new 3D environment, of course, also allowed for things such as jumps or tunnels, which added a new dimension to its navigation. There's now a physics system where vehicles had weight distributed differently, which allowed them to spin out of control or even roll over, which, for those who played, will remember was quite a frustrating mechanic to deal with. And importantly, the 61 different vehicles weren't just cosmetic, as each of them had their own strengths and uniquenesses with speed and handling. The physics engine was quite advanced for the time, allowing for fine details such as acceleration, how a car turns moving forward or reverse, whether or not the handbrake was engaged, how much weight they had, if they would knock around colliding vehicles or get knocked around by them. Each one would drift differently, some would be easier to flip over than others, and much more. They were diverse enough to introduce some critical agency, as of course some vehicles would be more or less appropriate than others for certain missions. Have a mission where you need to chase someone down? Well, you better bring the Speedy Banshee or the Infernus. Or maybe you need something that can survive a few hits, in which case maybe the Patriot or Cartel Cruiser would be more appropriate. For missions that go off-roading, something that doesn't flip so easily would be wise. And for missions that require escorting multiple civilians, it's best to go with a 3-passenger vehicle. The vehicles themselves are found unsupervised around the city, but more commonly you obtain them by carjacking civilians, as despite the out-of-control crime in the city, no one seems to remember to lock their doors.
These shoes are new!
Aside from cars, you also have boats, 3 different ones in total. Be careful not to fall off, as Claude cannot swim. The previously mentioned Clip Dodo, which is flyable with some practice. And lastly, there is also a train system that takes you between the 3 districts. As was standard with the series, it had such a heavy emphasis on travel and city navigation, and even by today's standards, the vehicles remained to be enjoyable to drive. Eventually, Claude earns enough trust with the mob to hold a personal audience with the Don, Salvatore Leone.
You go inside while I talk to our new friend here,
who introduces him to his wife, Maria, and tasks him with chauffeuring her to a local party. It ends up being raided by the police, but Claude is able to bring Maria back safely, and with the Triads now disposed of, the mob turns their attention to their much larger threat, the Colombian cartel, the same group that was responsible for the bridge attack at the beginning of the game. They're manufacturing a new drug called Spank, which has allowed them to vastly increase their influence across Liberty City, and through stalking a rat named Curly Joe, who is feeding the cartel information about the mob, we learn that the drugs are being manufactured on a large ship stationed at the docks. And so, Cloud and 8-Ball are tasked with shutting it down. They're able to accomplish this by the player posting up on a nearby rooftop with a sniper rifle, and covering 8-Ball as he infiltrates the ship and plants a bomb, blowing it up and sinking it to the bottom of the sea. Salvatore congratulates Claude, stating that he's on his way to become a made man, but before they could celebrate, he asked him to get rid of a blood-stained car that would tie the mob to a murder by taking it to a crusher. However, just as he's about to enter the vehicle, he receives a page from Maria warning him that it's a setup and that the car is rigged with a bomb. Yeah, just to make you feel a little bit older than necessary, this was the era before cell phones. As it turns out, his savior was the one who doomed him, as Maria had told the Don that she and Cloud were an item.
It's all my fault because I told him we were an item. Don't ask me why, I don't know.
Putting his life in obvious risk. Cloud meets with Maria and a member of the Yakuza gang, Asuka Kassen, and together the 3 flee to the second area of the game. At this point, the bridge is also fixed, which allows for free travel between the 2 islands, as the world effectively doubles in size. At this point, through your various law-breaking activities, you've certainly attracted the attention of the police, who operate similarly to the wanted system established in the previous 2 games. By committing crimes, such as killing people, stealing or blowing up vehicles, or just starting certain high-profile missions, you gain wanted levels on a 6-star system. It gets progressively more and more difficult to both survive and escape the higher wanted level you are. At level 1, one officer at a time will pursue and attack the player, with others, even if they're nearby, seemingly indifferent to your presence. At level 2, they'll start actively searching for you, and if you drive by them, they'll put on their lights and engage in pursuit. Like its predecessors, they will recklessly crash into you in an attempt to either arrest you or kill you, whichever happens first. Level 3 is the first tricky level for most new players, as the police become even more aggressive, even sending helicopters and setting up roadblocks to stop you in your tracks. At level 4, SWAT teams and vans are deployed, and roadblocks become even more bulky. At 5, which is getting into certain Doom territory for most players, the police are replaced by the much more powerful and aggressive FBI agents. The city at this point is evacuated and cleared of civilians, and the agents are equipped with AK-47s, which will make quick work of you if you're caught out in the open. And lastly, at level 6, the military is called in, pursuing you with M16s, barracks trucks, and even tanks. You, quote, lose by either being killed or arrested if a police officer knocks you down on the ground, or gets your driver's side door open. Although all is not lost, as you simply spawn at either a police station or a hospital, with all of your weapons relinquished and a chunk of cash removed. Removing the wanted levels are done in 3 different ways, either by simply evading the police and staying out of sight for a certain amount of time. There are also power-ups hidden throughout the game, such as back alleys or on top of buildings. And lastly, and the most common option, is to visit a paint spray shop while being out of sight of any police. Now a marked man, Claude's life is in the hands of the Japanese Yakuza. Trusting the word of Marie, Asuka offers to take on Claude as an associate, but tells him that he must first gain her trust and prove that he no longer has ties with the mafia by assassinating Salvatore Leone.
Salvatore Leone will be leaving Luigi's in about 3 hours' time. Make sure he doesn't reach his club alive.
And so, Claude crosses the newly repaired bridge into Portland, and he waits for the Don to leave Luigi's strip club by posting up on a nearby roof and expertly taking him out before anyone could notice.
Fuck! God damn it!
With Asuka's trust now earned, Claude begins a series of jobs for her, such as taking out mafia surveillance around Yakuza-owned buildings, assassinating an undercover cop posing as a limo driver, and meeting with another contact named Ray, a crooked cop who needs help disposing of fellow officers who are close to exposing him.
Another bad cop. Well, it's a bad world.
Through Asuka, Claude is also introduced to her brother, Kenji, who also makes use of Claude's skills by having him break an associate out of prison, stealing luxury cars for a friend of the clan, as well as hijacking a car of a local gang called the Yardies and killing cartel members in order to start a war between them. The missions in Staten Island are a clear step up from Portland, as the game slowly ramps up the difficulty, requiring good driving skills, knowledge of the map, as well as a wide arsenal of weapons, at which point you've gathered a decent stockpile of. In total there were 12, from your fists to pistols and Uzis, which are unique because they can be used for drive-by shootings. You also have machine guns, a sniper rifle, shotgun, flamethrower, grenades, Molotov cocktails, the rocket launcher, and if you want to count it, the armed tank. There were also some weapons that ended up being scrapped, such as the Magnum, the minigun, a silenced pistol and Uzi, an explosive satchel charge, as well as a few melee weapons such as the crowbar and the golf club. Although they did miss their debut in GTA 3, many of these weapons would eventually see the light of day in the game's various sequels. Obviously, the game is primarily a third-person perspective, but with the option to use first-person for manual aiming, and as it turns out from its design document, this dynamic was directly inspired by Rare's N64 hit, GoldenEye. So, along with the vehicles, this again introduced this dynamic of making sure you have the appropriate weapons before undertaking a certain mission. To acquire the guns, you either looted them from enemies that you killed, or more safely, purchased them from the ammunition gun shops, which you're introduced to very early in the game.
Luigi said you'd need a piece, so go around the back of the shop. I left you 9 in the yard.
Through Ray, Claude is introduced to an affluent businessman and celebrity named Donald Love, who holds more than a few skeletons in his closet.
He's involved in a legal matter, and the prosecution has some rather embarrassing photos of him at a morgue party or something.
Love is quite the evil and corrupt person, and gives Claude various tasks to further his empire. One example is, in order to drive down the prices of real estate in the city, he asks Claude to start a gang war between the Colombian cartel and the Yakuza by hijacking a cartel cruiser and murdering Kenji. And at this point, the players had to be experts at navigating the two islands. Something that was very useful for this was the minimap, which surprisingly was a new addition with the third. It is your constant companion and absolutely necessary in navigating the city efficiently, which is a requirement for some of the more tightly timed missions. But aside from that, each copy of the game also came out with this fold-out map to reference, complete with important markers such as ammo shops, paint sprays, and other critical points of interest. Aside from the large city to explore, the adventure part of the game comes in the form of collecting secrets and Easter eggs, the main being hidden packages, which are spread throughout the city. This gives not only exploration value, but also a functional use, as collecting them spawns these infinitely respawning weapons at your hideout. And as a callback to the first two, there are also power-ups that come in the form of pills that slow down time, as well as killing spree challenges that task you with killing as many gang members as possible within a certain time limit. So while the game was very action-oriented, it certainly didn't neglect the adventure side of its genre. At this point, the player starts getting into the endgame, where the difficulty reaches its highest point. Players may remember the mission where Donald Love tasked them to pick up packages in the river between Staten Island and Portland, with each package giving a wanted level up to 5, which is the highest encountered in a mission thus far, and quite difficult as it sends the FBI after them. But as difficult as it was, it turns out that they were just a decoy, with the real package being delivered while the police were distracted. Love asked the player to retrieve it for him from the final area of the game, the Shoreside Vale, which was now fully unlocked.
Cross the bridge to Shoreside Vale and go to Francis International Airport. I've paid off the officials.
However, the Colombian cartel got word of it and stole it for themselves. Claude tracks the package down to a large construction site back in Staten Island, where he uncovers none other than his girlfriend, Catalina, and the driver who betrayed him during the bank robbery.
Hey, we got no choice, baby.
No one's got a choice, you dumb bastard.
Catalina manages to escape, but not before shooting her associate, who is then found by Asuka, who is on a mission for revenge, as she believes the cartel was indeed responsible for the hit on her brother.
I never killed no Yakuza.
Liar! We all saw the cartel assassins. We are going to hunt down and kill all you Colombian dogs.
Beyond the main story missions, there are also side jobs that can be done for some extra content and cash. With the game having a day and night cycle, and mission contacts becoming unavailable at odd hours of the night, the game needed some viable options to kill time, with these side missions being one of them. They range from races, to terrain challenges, to RC missions where you blow up things with RC cars, as well as missions unique to vehicles such as the taxi, where you earn some extra money through fares. There's also Vigilante in the police car, where you flip the script and play the cop chasing down the criminals. Amazingly, finally seeing through the original design of Race and Chase all those years ago. At this point, the story focuses almost entirely on warring with the Colombian cartel, whether that be luring them into kill squads, taking out drug dealers spread across the 3 islands within a time limit, or even shooting down a plane with a rocket launcher and delivering its payload back to Asuka, whom Claude finds murdered. He learns that Catalina returned, killed Asuka, and kidnapped Maria, and is demanding a ransom of $500,000, which the player must come up with to complete this final mission of the game. When they do, they deliver the funds to Shoreside Vale. They're immediately betrayed because Catalina isn't the most trustworthy person, as we've learned.
But you haven't learned. I'm not to be trusted. Kill the idiot!
And she flees with Maria to the dam, where the Colombian cartel makes their final stand with guards and vehicles posted everywhere to stop Claude. The game concludes with Catalina fleeing in a helicopter, which Claude shoots down with a rocket launcher, sending it crashing into the dam with a violent explosion. He saves Maria from the cartel, and they walk off into the sunset.
I'm fucking nail and my hair is ruined. I mean, can you believe it? This one cost me $50.
The civilians detail the fantastical events they witnessed at the dam as the credits roll, ending the game that changed the industry forever. Although after the credits, the players returned to the game where they could complete unfinished side missions, unlock secrets, or just wreak havoc in the city that they came to know. With its open world city roaming, its high-octane action, and story-driven cutscenes, it took the player across Liberty City through a series of events resembling a Hollywood movie. And that's what it felt like, where you were controlling the protagonist's actions, stealing luxury vehicles, performing hits, making allies, betraying others, and climbing a rank in this criminal underworld. Today we have countless examples of games delivering these amazing worlds, characters, and stories that rival, if not put Hollywood to shame. But in 2001, GTA 3 in a lot of ways represents this critical moment when the industry was able to turn that corner with its advanced technology and graphic capability. The reason why it was so controversial wasn't even necessarily due to its violence alone, but rather its violence in one of the most realistic 3D worlds that the industry had produced at that point. It forced society to clutch their pearls, as this line between virtual and reality had begun to blur so much that they feared the innocent children could no longer differentiate between the two. Many believe that today, ironically enough, this taboo atmosphere surrounding it played a critical role in its success, as it immediately shattered sales records across the globe, selling over 1.4 million copies just a few months after its release in December, and 6 million by its one-year anniversary. With both GTA 3 and its sequels being exclusively released to the PlayStation 2 for the first few months of their debut, it became one of the most powerful system sellers in Sony's history, and to many it marks not just a critical moment within the video game industry, but entertainment culture as a whole, leaving behind a lasting legacy that continues to be built to this day. So, from a tiny computer lab located in Dundee, Scotland, to one of the highest grossing video game franchises of all time, this is why Grand Theft Auto 3, released on the PlayStation 2 on October 23rd, 2001, was great, and why its legacy for many will live on forever.
Since it was released 9 months ago, Grand Theft Auto 3 has sold 3.5 million copies.
It's one of those things you've been waiting for forever. It comes. No thanks.
The phenomenal success of Grand Theft Auto 3 has created a rush to match the game's over-the-top violence.
3, 2, 1, happy 2000!
What am I here? To get the
PlayStation 2.
Get the PlayStation. Get this. It's a wonderful piece of machinery. He's my friend. We're both waiting. How you doing? Hey.
One of the most eagerly awaited video games finally goes on sale.
Preparing to rewrite retail history.
Video game is expected to have bigger first-day revenue than any movie has ever had an opening day at the box office.
There is also no indication that anything can slow the explosive growth of the intoxicating game called World of Warcraft.
What people forget, what made Grand Theft Auto 3 the first major breakout hit in the series so memorable was the fact that it was an open, 3D, living, breathing world where you could do whatever you wanted at any time, find your own way to have fun, and that the characters were so deep and so interesting.
Just having an arcade inside your room, maybe even better than arcade graphics in your room.
Are you kidding me?
Nintendo's newest release is causing a commotion, and children aren't the only ones getting into it.
Go back over the bridge. Go over the, no, go back over the bridge. You gotta go over the bridge.
What people will do for their little entertainment system.
It is the most anticipated game in entertainment history.
The hype surrounding this movie has been overwhelming. Now the question is, will it deliver?
They're about to open the doors here in just a few minutes, and people are revved up.
World of Warcraft, baby! Yeah! We are there! We are there! We are there!
The irony in all this, according to experts who study child development, is that the louder the complaints about violence in video games, the greater the demand among teenagers.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.